At a quiet family dinner, my daughter-in-law served me a plate with a hidden agenda. My beloved grandson screamed, "Don't eat that." When another unsuspecting guest collapsed, I knew I had dodged death, and her cruel plan was revealed. I simply stared, realizing the depths of her betrayal. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from, as this is just the beginning of my story. The scent of roasted rosemary and garlic usually filled Eleanor's kitchen with warmth and comfort, a fragrance that was, to her, the very essence of home. At 68, she cherished these moments, especially the crisp autumn evenings when her small, welcoming house felt most alive. Tonight was one such occasion, a cozy family dinner she had prepared with love for her son, Daniel, his wife, Ava, and her dearest grandson, 12-year-old Leo. The table was set with her best china, candlelight flickering softly, ready for the joyous chatter of family. Yet, a subtle chill permeated the warmth, an unease that had been building in Eleanor for weeks. Ava, her daughter-in-law, had developed a new, cloying sweetness, a veneer that felt more like a mask than genuine affection. Her questions, seemingly innocent, had taken on an insistent, probing quality. "How are your blood pressure meds treating you, Eleanor? Are you still on those heart pills? Have you been feeling tired lately? You look a little pale." Each inquiry, delivered with a falsely concerned gaze, tightened a knot of suspicion in Eleanor's stomach. It wasn't the questions themselves, but the unnerving persistence, the way Ava's eyes seemed to linger, observing, evaluating. Daniel, her son, had also changed since marrying Ava 5 years ago. He was a good man, steady and kind, but lately, he seemed muted. His usual easygoing nature had been replaced by a quiet tension, a perpetual furrow in his brow. He seemed to shrink in Ava's presence, his once vibrant spirit dulled. And then there was Leo, her bright, intelligent grandson, who usually burst through her door with stories and laughter. Tonight, he was unusually quiet, his eyes darting between his mother and his grandmother, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his polite demeanor. He seemed to watch Ava almost constantly, a silent sentinel. Just as Eleanor was about to call everyone to the table, the doorbell chimed again. It was Brenda, Ava's mother, a woman in her early 70s, frail and soft-spoken, a gentle soul. Eleanor greeted her warmly, ushering her into the dining room where the delicious aroma of her slow-cooked pot roast finally settled over the table. Brenda took the seat across from Eleanor, a polite smile on her face. As everyone settled, Ava, with a flourish that felt unnecessarily dramatic, began serving. She held up a plate piled high with food, a generous portion of roast, potatoes, and a colorful array of steamed vegetables. "And this," she announced, her voice a little too bright, "is for Eleanor. With extra vegetables, just the way you like them, dear." She placed the plate directly in front of Eleanor. The specificity, the pointed way she emphasized Eleanor and extra vegetables, sent a fresh wave of unease through Eleanor. It was a perfectly normal plate, yet Ava's manner made it feel anything but. Eleanor's eyes met Leo's across the table for a split second, and she saw a flicker of raw fear in his young gaze. Eleanor reached for her fork, a polite smile fixed on her face, trying to dismiss her growing apprehension. As her hand closed around the utensil, a piercing, desperate cry erupted from Leo. "Grandma, don't eat that! Please, just go away!" The words shattered the quiet hum of the dinner, hanging in the air like shards of glass. Everyone froze. Daniel stared at his son, his mouth agape. Ava's smile faltered, replaced by a mask of annoyance. But Eleanor saw only Leo's face, contorted with a terror that went far beyond a childish tantrum. His eyes, wide and glistening, pleaded with her, a genuine, visceral fear radiating from him. This was not a boy misbehaving. This was a child who believed his grandmother was in grave danger. Acting purely on instinct, a sudden, inexplicable urge, Eleanor placed her fork down. Her mind raced, grasping at the strangeness of Ava's recent behavior, Daniel's quiet tension, and now Leo's desperate warning. "Oh, Brenda, dear," Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm so sorry, but I completely forgot I wanted to sit in that chair tonight. It catches the evening light so beautifully." Would you mind terribly switching seats with me? And perhaps we can swap plates too, so you can enjoy the lovely extra vegetables Ava prepared? She offered a strained but warm smile, hoping to make the sudden request sound utterly mundane. Brenda, ever the gentle soul, looked momentarily surprised but quickly nodded. Of course, Eleanor. Whatever you prefer. She rose from her seat, carefully transferring her own plate of food, which was identical to Eleanor's former spot, and then graciously took the designated, suspicious plate, settling into Eleanor's original chair. Ava's eyes, for a fleeting moment, narrowed, a flicker of something dark before she quickly composed herself, forcing a thin smile. Daniel, still looking bewildered by Leo's outburst, simply shrugged, accepting the change without question. Leo, however, continued to watch, a tight knot of anxiety still visible in his young face. The dinner resumed, albeit with an undercurrent of palpable tension. Eleanor made small talk, her mind racing, watching Brenda across the table. 15 minutes passed, each tick of the grandfather clock feeling like an eternity. Brenda ate slowly, politely, occasionally joining in the conversation. Then, in the middle of a sentence about her garden, Brenda suddenly paused. Her hand flew to her forehead, her face paling rapidly. Her eyes glazed over, and she swayed precariously in her chair. "Oh, dear," she murmured, her voice faint. "I feel so dizzy." Before anyone could react, Brenda slumped forward, collapsing onto the table with a soft thud, sending cutlery clattering. The sudden noise, the sight of her unconscious body, jolted everyone. Daniel sprang from his seat, shouting Brenda's name, his face contorted with panic. Ava shrieked, a high-pitched, panicked sound that seemed genuine in its terror. "Mom, what happened? Call 911. Amidst the chaos of frantic calls to emergency services, Daniel trying to rouse his mother-in-law, and Ava weeping hysterically. A chilling thought cut through Eleanor's mind with icy clarity. That should have been me. The words echoed with a terrifying certainty, a dreadful realization that solidified everything. Ava's questions, Daniel's tension, and Leo's desperate plea. It was all a prelude to this moment. A sinister plot that had almost claimed her life. Eleanor's gaze instinctively sought out Leo, who was standing frozen by Daniel's side, his small face pale with shock. Their eyes met across the chaotic room, and in the depths of his terrified gaze, Eleanor saw it, a brief, fleeting flicker of profound relief. In that instant, without a single word exchanged, Eleanor knew, her grandson knew what had been on that plate, and he had saved her. The horrifying truth settled upon her, cold and absolute. The ambulance sirens screamed through the quiet suburban streets, a piercing wail that tore through the autumn night. Brenda was rushed to St. Mary's Hospital, a blur of white coats and frantic activity. The waiting room was sterile and cold, a stark contrast to the cozy warmth of Eleanor's dinner table just an hour before. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an agonizing eternity. Finally, a doctor, his face grim, delivered the devastating news. It's ethylene glycol poisoning, antifreeze, a lethal dose. The words hung heavy in the air, a cruel, impossible sentence. Her kidneys are shutting down, we're doing everything we can. But her survival is critically doubtful. And if she does pull through, the damage could be permanent. Eleanor felt a cold dread settle deep in her bones, a realization that confirmed her darkest suspicions. Antifreeze, a common household product, easily accessible, virtually tasteless in food. It was insidious, silent, deadly. Daniel buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with what appeared to be grief. Ava, perched on the edge of a plastic chair, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, murmuring, "How could this have happened? Who would do such a thing?" Her voice was laced with performative distress, a theatrical sorrow that grated on Eleanor's raw nerves. Eleanor watched her, discerning the subtle lack of genuine anguish in Ava's eyes, the way her gaze darted around the room, assessing, rather than truly mourning. It was a flawless act, one that would have convinced anyone else, but Eleanor wasn't anyone else. Beside Eleanor, Leo remained unnervingly quiet, a small, still figure swallowed by the vastness of the waiting room. His eyes, though, held a depth of knowledge that no 12-year-old should possess. They darted from Ava to Eleanor, then back to the closed doors of Brenda's room, a silent plea for understanding. For a way out of this nightmare. He leaned into Eleanor's side, his small hand gripping her arm, a lifeline in a turbulent sea. As the early morning hours approached, Daniel, his voice hoarse, finally spoke. "There's nothing more we can do here tonight. We should all go home and try to get some rest. It's a long night ahead." Ava quickly chimed in. "Yes, Daniel's right. Leo has school tomorrow. We need to get him home." She glanced at her son, a subtle warning in her eyes. As they rose to leave the waiting room, Leo tugged gently on Eleanor's sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Can I stay with you tonight, please?" His eyes, wide and imploring, silently begged her to understand. To protect him, Eleanor's heart constricted. She looked at Ava, who had turned, a flash of irritation crossing her features before she quickly plastered on a forced smile. "Oh, Leo, sweetie, you know you have school," Ava began, her tone falsely gentle, but Eleanor cut her off, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Nonsense, Ava. Leo can absolutely stay with me. He's been through a terrible shock. He needs comfort, and I need his company. We'll manage school tomorrow." Ava's smile thinned, her eyes flashing with a barely contained anger. But she knew better than to challenge Eleanor directly in such a public setting. She simply nodded, a tight, controlled movement, before taking Daniel's arm and guiding him out, leaving Eleanor and Leo alone in the quiet corridor. Back at Eleanor's house, the silence was thick, punctuated only by the soft tick of the grandfather clock. Eleanor led Leo to the living room, wrapping a blanket around his trembling shoulders. She brewed him a mug of warm milk, then sat beside him on the sofa, pulling him close. The moment the front door clicked shut, and they were truly alone, the dam broke. Leo, who had held himself together with such remarkable strength, finally collapsed into shuddering sobs. "Grandma," he choked out, burying his face in her shoulder. "It was Mom. She put it in the food. I saw her." The words, whispered through tears, were a brutal confirmation of Eleanor's darkest fears. He was small and slight in her arms, and his body trembled with the force of his confession. He began to recount a story that chilled Eleanor to her very core, a tale of chilling calculation and casual cruelty. "She's been planning it for months," he sobbed, his voice muffled. "I heard her on the phone sometimes, talking about getting rid of the old bat. And she was always on her computer late at night, looking up things, different kinds of poisons, what they do, how to hide them." Eleanor stroked his hair, tears silently tracing paths down her own cheeks. "Why didn't you say anything, sweetheart?" "She threatened me," Leo whispered, pulling back slightly, his eyes still red and swollen. "She said if I ever told anyone, she'd send me away, to a boarding school, far, far away, where I'd never see you or Dad again. She even showed me pamphlets." He shuddered. "I saw her practicing, Grandma, putting white powder in drinks, then pouring them down the sink, or putting liquids into food she was cooking for herself, just to see if it changed the taste or smell." Eleanor felt a wave of nausea wash over her. This was the meticulous, cold-blooded planning of a killer, Leo continued, his voice gaining a desperate urgency. "She used me, Grandma. She'd send me to ask you about your heart medication, or if you were feeling tired. She said she was just concerned, but she wanted to know everything, to make it look like a heart attack, probably." Then, another devastating revelation. "And Dad," Leo hesitated, his eyes cloudy with confusion and pain. "He's been different too. He started asking you about your will, didn't he? A few weeks ago?" Eleanor remembered. Daniel had indeed brought it up. Subtly. Awkwardly. At the time, she dismissed it as normal curiosity, perhaps driven by Ava. Now, it painted a far more sinister picture. He asked about it. She confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. "I think he knows, Grandma," Leo said, his voice dropping to a new low, filled with profound sadness. He changed when Mom started talking about money, about your house, and your investments. Suddenly, a memory resurfaced, vivid and horrifying. Remember those times you got sick, Grandma? Leo continued, his voice trembling. The times you had stomach aches and felt dizzy for a day or two? I think she was testing doses. She told me you just had a bad stomach flu, but I saw her smirking when you went to bed early. Eleanor gasped, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying precision. The stomach flu she'd attributed to bad takeout or a bug had been Ava's twisted experiments. And, Leo finished, his voice cracking, she said once she got all your money, she was going to send me to boarding school for good. She said I was too much trouble, and she wanted a new life. Just her and Dad. She didn't want a kid around. His words were a final, crushing blow, revealing the utter callousness of Ava's plan. A plan that sacrificed not only Eleanor's life, but Leo's entire future. Simply for greed. The morning after Brenda's collapse, the house was steeped in a heavy quiet. Leo, exhausted by his confession and the night's terror, had finally fallen asleep, his small hand still clutched in Eleanor's. Eleanor herself hadn't slept a wink. She sat in the dim light of her living room, her mind a maelstrom of shock, grief, and a searing, righteous anger. The depth of Ava's cruelty, her cold ambition that extended even to abandoning her own stepson, shattered Eleanor. This wasn't just about greed. It was a profound sickness of the soul. But amidst the wreckage of her trust and her hopes for her family, a new, steely resolve began to form. A cold, calculating determination unlike anything she had ever felt before. She would stop Ava. She had to. Not just for herself, but for Leo, and even for Daniel, who seemed to be losing himself to Ava's manipulation. But instinct and Leo's heartbreaking testimony wouldn't be enough. She needed proof. Irrefutable evidence that would stand up in a court of law, that would tear down Ava's carefully constructed facade. She looked down at Leo, still sleeping soundly, his face innocent and vulnerable. He was her witness, her co-conspirator, her reason to fight. She gently untangled her hand from his and went to the kitchen, a plan already beginning to form in her mind. When Leo finally woke, Eleanor sat him down with a plate of pancakes, his favorite. His eyes were still red, but a glimmer of something akin to hope, albeit fragile, had replaced the raw fear. Leo, she began, her voice calm and steady. We have a very important, very dangerous project ahead of us. It will save both our lives, and maybe your father's too. But I need you to be incredibly brave, and incredibly smart. Can you do that? He nodded, solemnly. Yes, Grandma. Anything. Just as they finished breakfast, the phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice, though laced with a feigned concern, held an underlying impatience that Eleanor immediately detected. Mom, how are you feeling? Such a terrible night. Are you all right? How's Leo? Eleanor adopted her new role. Her voice, usually strong and clear, now sounded frail, a little shaky. Oh, Daniel, darling, I don't quite know. I feel so shaken. My head is swimming, and my heart just keeps racing. Poor Brenda. It's just unimaginable. She injected a slight tremor into her words, letting her voice crack just a little. Yes, it's awful, Mom. Truly awful, Daniel replied, his tone lacking genuine empathy. Look, about last night, with Brenda. It's really got Ava and me thinking, with everything going on, and, well, your age, Mom. Maybe it's time to consider something different. Perhaps you shouldn't be cooking so much anymore. And honestly, with your health, we were thinking, maybe assisted living? Just for a little while. To get you back on your feet and safe. Eleanor felt a jolt of icy anger. Assisted living? He's practically trying to get me out of the way already. It was clear Ava had prompted this. She kept her voice neutral, almost wistful. Assisted living, you say? Well, I suppose it's a thought, Daniel. I'm certainly not as spry as I used to be, especially after all this. It's a lot to consider. She paused, then pressed on, her voice gaining a touch of firm resolve. But for now, I absolutely need Leo here with me. He's been through so much. He needs his grandmother. And honestly, I need him. Just for a few more days, at least, until things settle down. Daniel hesitated. A few more days? But, Mom, he has school. He'll be fine, Eleanor interrupted, her voice gentle but unwavering. We'll do some homework. I'll teach him to bake. He needs this time, Daniel. And so do I. I promise to send him back by the end of the week, but for now, he stays. Daniel, caught between appearing heartless by denying a grieving grandmother and his wife's obvious agenda, reluctantly conceded. All right, Mom, a few days. Just be careful, okay? Oh, I will, darling. I will. Eleanor hung up the phone, her hand still trembling, but not from fear. From the exhilarating thrill of the game now truly afoot, she turned to Leo, whose small face was etched with a mixture of fear and growing determination. All right, Leo, she said, her voice dropping to a serious conspiratorial whisper. This is where our project begins. You are the only one who can help me. We are going to work together, and we are going to expose her. He looked at her, his big eyes wide. What do we do, Grandma? He asked, his voice still small but steady. First, Eleanor began, leading him to her old oak desk, pulling out a large notepad and a pen. We write down everything, every single detail you remember, dates, times, what she said, what you saw, the phone calls, the computer searches, the times I got sick. Everything, for the next few hours. They painstakingly documented Leo's memories. Eleanor listened intently, guiding him, asking probing questions that unearthed more details. When did you first hear her talk about getting rid of the old bat? Which illnesses do you remember me having? And do you recall anything unusual Ava did around those times? Leo, though clearly pained by the memories, recounted them with remarkable precision. The dates of her various stomach flus, the specific phrases Ava used, the times she practiced with powders and liquids. It was a chilling testament to Ava's calculated malevolence. Once their makeshift evidence log was complete, Eleanor looked at Leo, her expression serious. Now, this is the dangerous part, sweetheart. My plan is this. I'm going to act sick, confused, frail. I want Ava to think she's succeeded, that her attempts are working, that I'm fading away. I want her to become overconfident, careless. That's when she'll make mistakes. Leo's eyes widened with apprehension. But, Grandma, what if she tries again? Eleanor squeezed his hand, her gaze unwavering. She will. And this is the most crucial part, Leo. I promise you, I will not consume anything she gives me. Nothing she cooks, nothing she pours, nothing that has passed through her hands directly. I will pretend to, but I will not truly ingest it. I will always have a way to dispose of it, or to switch it. Just like we did with Brenda's plate. He looked at her, fear still evident, but now mingled with a spark of admiration and trust. He nodded, a silent vow passing between them. He was in this, heart and soul. Later that day, when Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, Eleanor was ready. She had rehearsed her act with Leo, her grandson watching with wide, anxious eyes as she deliberately mussed her hair, smudged her lipstick, and practiced a hesitant gait. When Daniel and Ava walked in, Eleanor greeted them with a vague, almost confused smile. "Oh, Daniel, Ava, dear," she murmured, her voice sounding faint and distant. "You're here already? I thought it was morning." Ava immediately stepped forward, her face a mask of concern that Eleanor could now read with terrifying clarity. "Eleanor, dear, you look awful. Still feeling dizzy? Forgetting things?" Her eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of deep satisfaction, a gleam that suggested her plan was unfolding exactly as she'd hoped. "Yes, quite," Eleanor replied, allowing her voice to tremble. "My head is just so fuzzy, and I keep getting these strange spells. I almost fell earlier, trying to get a cup of tea." She swayed slightly for emphasis, clutching at the doorframe. This was her moment, her trump card. "That's why," she continued, her voice gaining a fragile urgency. I really think Leo should stay another night, just until I feel a little more steady. I feel so much safer with him here. He's been such a help, remembering where I put things. Ava's eyes widened, then her smile returned, even brighter this time. Oh, of course, Eleanor, that's a wonderful idea. Leo is so responsible. He can look after you, make sure you don't have any more episodes of confusion, as you call them. It's important you feel safe. She glanced at Daniel, who seemed surprised but didn't object, likely relieved that Leo wouldn't be underfoot tonight. Ava was practically beaming. Eleanor's apparent decline was more advanced than she could have hoped. Once Daniel and Ava had left, Eleanor dropped the act, turning to Leo. She thinks she's so clever, Leo, she said, her voice sharp with a mix of anger and grim satisfaction. But she's predictable. She's getting overconfident, and that's when people make mistakes. Later that evening, Ava called. Eleanor answered, affecting a weak, confused tone. Hello? Oh, Ava, dear, is that you? She rambled about her dizzy spells and an upset stomach, mentioning how Leo had to remind her to take her evening medications. He's been such a comfort, she sighed. A real blessing. Ava, ever the opportunist, seized on it. Eleanor, darling, perhaps you should go to the emergency room? Just to be safe. Oh no, dear, I couldn't possibly. Eleanor feigned a shudder. Hospitals are so unsettling. Besides, I'm just so tired. But you know, she added, an almost imperceptible shift in her tone. This house does feel awfully big for someone in my condition. So many stairs. So many rooms to forget what I was doing in. It was a calculated hook, and she could almost hear Ava biting at the other end of the line. The next day, the third day of her meticulous performance, the phone rang again. It was Ava, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Eleanor, darling, I've been so worried about you. These spells you're having. Daniel and I were talking, and we're just so concerned. Perhaps you've had a small stroke? Or something equally serious? Eleanor allowed a moment of silence, letting the suggestion sink in. A small stroke. Convenient. Ava was not only diagnosing her, but attempting to create a plausible, natural cause for Eleanor's anticipated demise. Then came the inevitable proposal. That's why, Eleanor, we think it would be best if you moved in with us. Just until you're feeling better, of course. We have plenty of room, and we can look after you properly. It would give us such peace of mind. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The move. The complete control. They were accelerating their timeline. They believed she was weak, vulnerable, perhaps even incapable of making her own decisions. She was a mere pawn in their game. Ripe for the taking. The terrifying truth hit her like a physical blow. She still lacked the irrefutable, direct evidence the authorities would need. A child's testimony, even one as compelling as Leo's, wouldn't be enough against Ava's calculated deception. She had to let them try again. And this time, she had to be ready. Oh, Ava, Eleanor sighed, her voice barely a whisper, filled with a feigned reluctance. That's so very kind of you. I don't want to be a burden. Nonsense, Eleanor. You could never be a burden, Ava cooed, her voice practically purring with triumph. We'll send Daniel over tomorrow to help you pack a few things. Eleanor ended the call, her hand shaking. Her facade had worked too well. Now, she was willingly stepping into the lion's den. But she wasn't going in unprotected. She immediately picked up the phone again and dialed Arthur Jenkins, her longtime lawyer. His voice, crisp and professional, was a welcome anchor in the storm of her emotions. Arthur, she said, her voice low and steady. I need to change my will. Everything. I want to leave it all to Leo. And I need you to be his trustee. Arthur, initially surprised, listened with growing horror as Eleanor recounted the nightmare of Brenda's poisoning, Leo's confession, and Ava and Daniel's accelerating plot. He was aghast. Eleanor, this is attempted murder. We need to go to the police. Not yet, Arthur, Eleanor insisted, her voice unwavering. We don't have enough. Ava is too clever. They'll spin it as an accident, or say I'm senile. Leo's testimony, as a child, won't hold up alone against their fabricated concern. She explained her dangerous plan, her intention to allow Ava to make another move, one that she would meticulously document. Arthur argued, pleaded, but Eleanor was resolute. I need protections in place, Arthur. For Leo, if anything happens to me, I need you to have full guardianship papers, legally binding, so Ava and Daniel cannot touch him or his inheritance. Not a cent. They want my money. They will get nothing but the consequences of their actions. Reluctantly, gravely, Arthur agreed to help. He promised to draft all the necessary documents immediately, including the detailed guardianship papers. And one more thing, Arthur, Eleanor added, her voice softening, a profound love shining through her steely resolve. I need you to write a letter. From me to Leo. A long, heartfelt letter, telling him how much I love him, telling him that nothing that has happened or will happen is his fault. That he is brave and good, and he saved me. I need him to never feel an ounce of guilt for any of this. Arthur, deeply moved, promised he would. If you're gripped by Eleanor's dangerous game, don't miss what happens next. Like this story, share it with your friends, and subscribe to follow every twist and turn of her quest for justice. Your support helps bring these stories to life. With Arthur Jenkins already setting the legal groundwork, Eleanor turned her attention to the immediate danger. Her first call was to Doris Miller, her sharp-witted neighbor, a woman of 72 with eyes that missed nothing and a tongue that could cut glass. Doris, dear, Eleanor began, her voice carefully modulated to sound a little weak. I need to ask you a rather large favor. A crucial one. Doris, who had never made a secret of her disdain for Ava's superficial charm, readily agreed. Anything for you, Eleanor. Is it about that dreadful daughter-in-law of yours? I always said there was something off about her. Eleanor briefly explained the urgency, without divulging the full, horrific truth. Knowing Doris would respect the gravity of the situation, when Daniel and Ava arrive today, I need you to watch my house, Doris. Very, very closely. If you see anything at all that seems wrong, if I'm being taken out on a stretcher, or if I seem unconscious, or if Leo looks scared or distressed, I need you to call the police immediately. Tell them it's an emergency, that I fear foul play. Doris, her voice grim, promised she would be a hawk. Eleanor spent the morning preparing her house as a stage for the coming act. In her bedroom, she meticulously applied a pale foundation to her face, darkening the shadows under her eyes, making herself appear genuinely ill and frail. She practiced trembling her hands, slurring her words just slightly, perfecting her portrayal of mental and physical decline. This wasn't just about convincing Ava, it was about convincing anyone who might later review the scene. She moved through the house, her movements precise and deliberate. She hid a tiny digital recorder deep within the lining of her favorite purse, which she would keep by her side. Another recorder was tucked away in a decorative pot on the kitchen counter, angled subtly towards the main living area. Finally, she briefed Leo. Remember our system, sweetheart, she whispered, handing him her old, deactivated phone. Every hour, on the hour, you send Doris a blank text message. It's our safety check. If you don't send it, or if you send anything else, she'll know something is wrong. And if you feel unsafe at any point, no matter what, you go straight to her house. Tell her everything. Leo, though still scared, nodded, a newfound resolve in his young eyes. Shortly after noon, Daniel's car pulled up. Eleanor was waiting by the window, slouched slightly, her breathing shallow. When they entered, she offered a weak, confused smile. Oh, Daniel, Ava, you're here for the packing, yes? She let her voice trail off, her eyes vacant. Ava, ever the predator, immediately took charge. Yes, Eleanor, dear, just a few essentials for your stay with us. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. She moved through Eleanor's home with a possessive familiarity that made Eleanor's skin crawl. Ava opened drawers, rifled through closets, already acting as if she owned the place, a sinister preview of the future she envisioned. Daniel, looking uncomfortable, simply followed his wife's lead. Eleanor watched, feigning disorientation, allowing Ava to make decisions, to assert her control. She clutched her purse tightly, the hidden recorder silently capturing every word, every rustle. After about 20 minutes, Ava re-emerged from the kitchen, a steaming mug in her hand. "Eleanor, dear," she cooed, her voice saccharine sweet. "I've made you a lovely cup of chamomile tea. It will help settle your stomach and calm your nerves." "You look absolutely dreadful." Eleanor's heart leaped. This was it. The second attempt. The tea, innocent as it looked, was undoubtedly poisoned. She accepted the mug with hands that genuinely trembled, her mind racing. "Oh, thank you, Ava. That's very thoughtful." She brought the mug to her lips, tilting it just so, pretending to take a sip, but allowing most of the liquid to spill discreetly back into the cup, barely touching her tongue. She pulled the mug away, her brow furrowed. "It tastes rather odd, dear," she murmured, her voice weak. "A bit bitter, almost metallic." She watched Ava's face carefully, seeing a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by dismissive amusement. "Oh, Eleanor, it's just the chamomile," Ava chuckled, though her eyes were sharper than her tone. "Or perhaps you're just not feeling well, and everything tastes a bit off. Drink it slowly. It'll do you good." Her tone was laced with an undeniable edge, a subtle command. Eleanor nodded weakly, pretending to take another small sip, again allowing most of it to dribble back. She then let out a soft groan. "Oh, I really think I need to lie down. This is all too much." She slowly pushed herself up from the armchair, her movements exaggeratedly unsteady. She swayed precariously, her hand flying to her head. Leo, who had been quietly packing some of his own things, looked up, his face a mask of concern, but he remembered their instructions. He glanced at his own phone, ready for the signal. Eleanor took 2 more deliberate, wobbly steps. Then, with a dramatic gasp, she allowed her legs to buckle. She collapsed onto the plush living room couch with a soft thump, her eyes fluttering shut. Her breathing became shallow, ragged, almost imperceptible. She heard Ava cry out, a sound that mixed feigned panic with genuine surprise, and then Daniel's panicked shouts. She had done it. She had ingested nothing, and the act was convincing. The trap was set. The moment Eleanor collapsed onto the couch, the silence that had followed Ava's tea offer shattered. Daniel, ever the less calculating of the two, rushed forward, his face a mask of genuine panic. "Mom, Eleanor, what happened?" He turned, frantic, to Ava. "Call 911. She's not breathing right." Ava, however, remained eerily calm, her voice a stark contrast to Daniel's rising hysteria. "Daniel, wait," she said, her tone almost admonishing. "She's had these episodes before, remember? Sometimes they just pass. Let's give her a minute." Through barely opened eyes, Eleanor watched, a shiver running down her spine. She saw Ava's gaze flick down to her wrist, checking her watch, chillingly timing her intended demise. 3 minutes. That's how long she plans to wait before calling for help. It was a cold, calculated act of murder by inaction. Leo, who had been frozen by the sudden drama, found his voice. "Mom, call 911. Grandma needs help," he cried, his small face streaked with tears and terror. Ava barely spared him a glance, her eyes fixed on Eleanor's seemingly lifeless form. "In a minute, sweetie," she said, her voice dismissive, her intent clear. She was waiting for the poison to do its work, for Eleanor to be undeniably gone. The minutes stretched into 2, then 3, each second an eternity in Eleanor's staged darkness. Daniel, his own fear overriding Ava's quiet insistence, finally pulled out his phone, his hands trembling. "I'm calling." "Ava, I don't care, she needs help." Just as Daniel was about to dial, Ava interjected, her voice flat, almost devoid of emotion. "Daniel, I think she's already gone." The words hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement of victory, but Eleanor was far from gone. She heard the distant wail of sirens, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. Doris. Her heart swelled with gratitude for her astute neighbor. This was her cue. With a dramatic gasp, Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. She coughed weakly, feigning immense confusion. What happened? Where am I? Her voice was a fragile whisper. Her brow furrowed in disorientation. The paramedics burst through the door moments later, their faces grim, their movements efficient. They took in the scene: the pale, confused woman on the couch, the distraught son, the outwardly concerned daughter-in-law, and the terrified grandson. They immediately began checking Eleanor's vital signs, hooking her up to monitors. Eleanor, summoning every ounce of her acting ability, gave the performance of her life. I had some tea," she murmured weakly to the paramedic checking her pulse. "Ava made it. It tasted so strange, bitter, almost metallic." She made sure the words were audible, ensuring that crucial detail would be documented. The paramedics exchanged a look. "Mrs. Vance, we need to take you to the hospital for observation," one of them stated firmly. "Just a precaution, to make sure everything's all right." Ava, seeing her carefully orchestrated plan unraveling, quickly interjected. "Oh, but is that really necessary? She seems to be coming around, and she hates hospitals." The lead paramedic, a no-nonsense woman with kind but firm eyes, gave Ava a stern look. "Ma'am, a collapse of this nature, especially with reported odd tastes, always warrants a hospital visit. We're taking her in." Ava's objections were silenced. As they gently maneuvered Eleanor onto a stretcher, she made sure to grab her purse, clutching it tightly, the hidden recorder still running. Her eyes found Leo's across the room, and she gave him a subtle, reassuring nod. His face, though still pale, now held a flicker of understanding, a fragile hope. At St. Mary's Hospital, Eleanor continued her masterful performance. She was vague, confused, occasionally lucid. She answered questions about her medical history, with carefully chosen omissions. As expected, the battery of medical tests, blood work, scans, neurological exams, came back normal. There was no poison in her system, no sign of a stroke, no physical explanation for her collapse. When a kind nurse asked about the odd taste she'd mentioned earlier, Eleanor casually recounted. "Oh yes, my daughter-in-law, Ava, made me a cup of tea. Chamomile, I think she said, but it had such a strange, bitter, metallic taste. I remember thinking it wasn't right." She watched, satisfied, as the nurse scribbled the detail into her chart. The seed was planted. The official record now contained Ava's involvement and the suspicious taste. Later that evening, Daniel and Ava came to visit. Eleanor was propped up in bed, looking frail and bewildered. "Daniel, Ava," she greeted them, her voice weak. "They can't find anything wrong with me. The doctors are stumped. One minute I was fine, the next." She trailed off, shaking her head in feigned confusion. Eleanor observed Ava from beneath her eyelashes. The feigned concern was still there, but beneath it, Eleanor could clearly see the growing frustration, the barely concealed rage. Her plan had failed again. Not only had Eleanor not died, but now there were official medical records. Documents detailing her mysterious collapse, her symptoms, and the crucially noted, strange-tasting tea made by Ava. The trap was tightening. Eleanor lay in her hospital bed, the sterile white sheets, a stark contrast to the vivid, terrifying drama unfolding around her. When Daniel and Ava came to visit, Eleanor continued her performance, feigning confusion. "The doctors keep asking about that tea, Ava," she murmured, her voice weak, almost an afterthought. "Especially about the metallic taste. They said they might want to test it." Ava's carefully constructed facade cracked. Her face went noticeably pale, her eyes darting nervously. "Oh, that old cup. I threw it away, Eleanor. While I was cleaning up before the ambulance arrived. It was just an old mug anyway, not worth keeping." The lie was delivered with a forced casualness that didn't quite cover the panic. Eleanor nodded, feigning forgetfulness, but inside, a triumphant chill spread through her. She knew the cup, mostly full of the poisoned liquid, was safely tucked away in her dishwasher at home, a crucial piece of evidence. And she knew Doris Miller, her sharp-eyed neighbor, had likely witnessed Ava's nervous cleaning up and discarding something in the garbage. a seemingly insignificant detail that could now be corroborated. As visiting hours ended, Ava, still trying to project an image of solicitous care, leaned in. "We're going to take such good care of you, Eleanor," she cooed, a chilling promise in her voice. "You'll never have to worry about anything again." Eleanor met her gaze. A faint, seemingly confused smile on her lips. She caught Leo's eye, her grandson standing by Daniel's side, and gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible wink. "I'll be home soon, sweetheart," she promised, her voice a whisper, meant only for him. "And when I come home, everything is going to be different." The next afternoon, Eleanor was discharged from the hospital. She maintained her act of fragility and confusion perfectly, allowing Daniel to wheel her out to the car as if she were a delicate invalid. The drive to their house was quiet, a tense silence broken only by Ava's forced cheerfulness. Eleanor was led to a downstairs guest room, intentionally far from Leo's room upstairs. It was a spacious room, tastefully decorated, yet to Eleanor, it felt like a cell. The window, though large, offered only a view of a manicured hedge, and the door clicked shut with an ominous finality. She carefully placed her purse, recorder still running, on the bedside table. That evening, dinner was served. A light meal, Ava called it. A bland soup and toast. Eleanor ate sparingly, pushing the food around her bowl, claiming her stomach was still upset from her episode. Ava watched her like a hawk, her eyes constantly assessing. Later that night, as Eleanor lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, she heard hushed voices from the living room, seeping through the floorboards. She reached for her purse, pressing the record button on the hidden device. It was Ava on the phone, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Yes, she's getting worse, more confused, weaker by the hour. It's not going to be much longer." Eleanor's heart pounded. She heard a sigh of relief from the other end of the line, then Ava's confident, almost gleeful voice. No, everything's going according to plan. Just a matter of time now." Later still, she heard Daniel and Ava talking, their voices barely audible. "How much longer, Ava?" Daniel asked, a strained quality to his voice. "Just a little more patience, Daniel," Ava replied, her tone sharp. "Think of the inheritance. No more dealing with that awful job of yours. Think of the freedom." Then came the cold, devastating revelation. "And Leo," Ava added, her voice devoid of maternal warmth. "As soon as everything is settled, he's off to that boarding school we looked at. We don't need a child holding us back from our new life." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The recording was capturing every vile word. The next morning, Ava brought Eleanor a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice for breakfast. Eleanor smiled weakly, accepting it with trembling hands. As Ava turned to leave, Eleanor discreetly poured most of the juice into a nearby potted plant, its leaves already looking a little droopy from previous donations. She then refilled the glass with plain water from the tap. Around noon, Eleanor once again heard Ava on the phone, her voice urgent this time. "It has to be today. The old bat is starting to ask too many questions about the doctors, about the hospital. She's not as confused as she should be. Afternoon tea. I'll make it strong enough to ensure there are no more episodes." Eleanor's blood ran cold. This was it. The final attempt. She sent a coded text to Doris, a single emoji of a teacup, followed by a skull. Then she checked her purse recorder, ensuring it was still active, and placed another small device under the cushion of the armchair where she would sit. She found Leo, his face etched with worry, and pulled him close. "Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice firm, unwavering. "No matter how bad it looks, no matter what you see, don't try to stop her. Let it play out. Do you understand? It's important. This is how we win." Leo, though terrified, nodded, his eyes wide with desperate understanding. At precisely 4 p.m., a delicate tap sounded on the guest room door. Ava entered, carrying a silver tray with a steaming teacup and a small plate of biscuits. Her voice was syrupy sweet, oozing warmth and false caring. "Eleanor, dear," she purred, "I've made you a lovely cup of chamomile tea, just what you need." The stage was set.